It's the final word, T20 World Cup Daily, day 28, a day where there isn't a game, but there's a final tomorrow, the final of the tournament between Team India and South Africa. The Proteas finally making a big one. It'll be at Kensington Oval in Barbados. We're here for Westfield London, Westfield Stratford City, more extra, less ordinary. Adam Collins with you, Geoff, in Barbados, ahead of the big one. How are you seeing it? How are you feeling?
How are we feeling? Feeling like it's been a long road. It wasn't as long as the 50 over World Cup. We're basically going to be in and out in about 4 weeks, which is relatively compact. But it's been such a dense tournament. It's been like a rich Christmas fruitcake of a tournament. There have been bits and pieces, unexpected things. You're like, is that a fig? Why is there a fig in there? Did somebody soak some dates in brandy? It seems like maybe they did. You know, there are fruits that you weren't expecting. There were results we weren't expecting. There were performances we weren't expecting. We had 20 teams at the start of the tournament. Suddenly it was chaos getting across the form lines and players of 20 different sides, and then and how quickly that got whittled down to 8, and all of the issues around weather and politics and travel and who was going to be where, and Florida getting washed out and all the rest of it, and then the Super 8s finding their way to their close, and the surprise results with Afghanistan, and then suddenly we're into the semi-final stage with barely time to draw breath, and a couple of absolute poundings in the semi-final stages. You know, there were 2 beltings dished out and 2 unbeaten sides going through. So there's never been a side to win a T20 World Cup without dropping a game before. There will be this time around, because India and South Africa, one of them's going to have to go through. Logic dictates.
Yeah, South Africa won 8 times. India won 7. They had the no result against Canada. So, you know, for all of the chat around the format and all else that's gone on in the last 27 days to now, we've got it down to the 2 teams that really should be there. South Africa were unconvincing in the group stage, especially their batting in New York, but they've found a way to keep winning, and credit to them for that. And they've gotten over the psychological hurdle in the semi-final, helped along by the fact that Australia weren't there, of course. It's been probably lost in the commentary a little bit that Australia have been South Africa's nemesis at the pointy end of tournaments for a long time. But they've made it through, and that's a huge thing for South African cricket more widely. And India, who went undefeated throughout last year's 50 over World Cup. I remember when we had this corresponding conversation, Geoff, previewing the 50 over final. I said if India were to lose, it'd be akin to when Buster Douglas knocked out Mike Tyson in 1990, right? Like, you know, what's widely considered to be the biggest upset in the history of sport, certainly the biggest upset in my lifetime in any one-on-one contest. Well, you know, it's not that level, though, with these 2 teams. Like, in T20 cricket, India have won 14 times. South Africa have won 11 times. I mean, they match up pretty well, even in recent times, acknowledging that India did beat South Africa by 106 runs the last time they met, have had the wood on them a little bit in recent years. But the last World Cup game they played was at Perth in 2022, when it was the might of South Africa's seam attack that put India under pressure early, and they went on to win by 5 wickets. So, yeah, it's not as mismatched as I felt like the the 50 over final was last year. But I mean, even so, though, with all of the structural advantages that are there for India through this tournament, the way they've played, the way they've peaked at the absolute perfect time, it might be more akin to like the Miracle on Ice at the 1980 Winter Olympics with Team USA and the Russians, or the Soviets as they were known then. Maybe not quite the boxing bout that I referred to, but a game of ice hockey. Given we were talking about ice hockey quite a bit, and the New York Islanders with Long Island Mike earlier in the comp, feels almost appropriate that we go back there to something that happened in 1980. But yeah, for all of that, these teams do shape up pretty well against each other. This could be a cracking final.
I think they shape up better on paper than they do in the field right now, though. This is my read from watching both these teams play a fair bit over the last few weeks, that you've got a situation where we start with the pitch here. So the pitch in Barbados is likely to be, they'll try to make it as flat as possible, presumably. You know, they'll shape it there and try to make it a batting pitch. It was more of a batting pitch here than a lot of the other tracks during this tournament. We saw, Australia make 200 against England. Scotland made nearly 90 off 10 overs against England there. Scotland batted quickly against Namibia at the end. So there have been some fast-scoring games on this track, so it's not likely to be as difficult as, say, the one they had in the semi-final. But the way India played that semi-final track makes me think, bloody hell, they're hard to beat, and they will be hard to beat when there's it's not. I doubt it's going to be a perfect batting surface, right? They're not going to go out and have an absolute belter to hit through the line on. So there probably still will be some changes of pace. There'll be some sticking in the surface. There'll be that sort of caution needed to choose the right ball to whack. And that was the most telling thing about India's semi-final win for me, was that Rohit Sharma and Suryakumar Yadav particularly are masters at figuring out how to bat on slightly slow pitches or to bat attackingly on pitches that don't support attacking batting, basically. They've got an ability to go to a different gear, the correct gear on that sort of surface where others find it hard to read. And that was so decisive the 170 they made might as well have been 250 on a different surface. It was, they were saying it was maybe 20 over par. I felt like it was 40 over par on that surface with the kind of purchase that even Bumrah was getting with his slower balls, the variety of spin that they've got and that sort of thing. It probably won't be as stoppy here, but in terms of their ability to tailor their game to a slow surface versus the battles that the South African batting has had throughout the tournament, I think India have got a massive advantage in that respect.
Yeah, I think the massive advantage can be boiled down to their bowling, especially Bumrah, right? And we've gone on about the skill and numbers of Jasprit Bumrah throughout the course of the tournament, but the fact that he's averaging 8 for wickets alone stands out so starkly, and he's been so difficult to get away across every game. I think he's gone worse than a runner ball on one occasion across 7 completed games in the tournament. It's ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
So, as Daniel put it quite neatly earlier in the tournament, it's like you're playing with 18 overs where Bumrah's involved, because he'll never go for more than, say, 18 or 19 at absolute most. So if you're viewing it through average scores, you've got 18 overs to get your runs, because you're only getting half your runs that you normally would off a normal bowler with Bumrah.
Yep.
Now, on the other side of the ledger, of course, Anrich Nortje has taken 13 wickets, an economy rate in the 5s, and we've gone through before why he's the most effective World Cup, T20 World Cup bowler ever across the various categories throughout 3 World Cups for him. But, and look, he's so good in the middle overs. That's the other thing when you're looking at the tactics and looking at how they might match up against each other. With Bumrah, it's up top and it's at the end. With Nortje, it's actually in the middle. So they're performing slightly different roles, despite being 2 of the finest fast bowlers in the world, Bumrah being number 1 clearly in T20 cricket. So, yeah, I'm interested in that sort of tactical, strategic, if you like, battle where they have to work out what to do and when to do it based on their opposition. Some teams go into a final and they say, well, we'll just do what we do and we'll let the rest take care of itself. I don't think that's sensible when you're going into a tournament where you have so much data that you've gathered about the other team in the last 4 weeks. It's not like we're working off. Sometimes T20 numbers can be a bit rubbery because they don't play as much of that format as other games. So, for example, India have played 9 completed games this year. 7 of them have been in the last 3.5 weeks. So you can read something into the way they're playing. So I think it'd be sensible for them to say Suryakumar Yadav, who is absolutely clouting fast bowling, but not going quite so well against slower bowling, and you wait for the right time to use Maharaj, which will be tricky, especially if they play Bartman and they don't have Shamsi in the 11. I'm not sure where they fall on that, Geoff, and I'm interested in your perspective on whether they go with the frontline specialist spinner. But using your slow bowler against Suryakumar Yadav makes sense, even though it might feel like it's better to keep on using Maharaj in the power play, where he's been so good through the tournament as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because you would think on a slightly better batting deck, most teams tend to go conservative and go for the extra seamer. But then you think about the 5 dot balls Bartman bowled in and over to England, which almost cost them the game. And you think of the wickets that Shamsi's been picking up frequently throughout the back half through the games that he has been playing. He's been dangerous down the order. India do have Kuldeep, so they will have faced a bit more left-arm wrist spin in the nets than most, but he's still a different bowler. Shamsi, it's different trajectory, different kind of pace on the ball. So I think it's a weapon to have a left-arm wrist spinner in your setup. And I'm interested to try to figure out, everybody's very clever after the fact about whether the team that won the toss should have done this or should have done that, depending on whether they won or lost. I was trying to figure out how South Africa can win this. And even like predictions are useless, right? So they could come out and just play a brilliant game and make all of this look stupid, and that's fine. And if they do, more power to them. But there's kind of this perverse thing, because they've been an awful chasing team through this tournament, right? Like they really struggled to chase a tiny target against Sri Lanka. If we run through their tournament, they really struggled to chase a tiny target against the Dutch. They set a tiny target against Bangladesh and Nepal and just managed to hold them both off when they could have and probably should have lost both of those games. There was the 4-leg bias thing that was discounted. There was the ricochet at the end of the Nepal game. Both those games could well have been dropped. They set a good target against the USA and then barely defended it. Decent target against England and barely defended that. And then they were back to chasing against the West Indies and they were dreadful again and they almost lost that game and perhaps should have lost that game had West Indies been able to hold things together a bit. And even chasing 56, 57 against Afghanistan, there were 3 or 4 overs where it looked like there was a slight possibility that they might not do it. You know, it wasn't nailed on from the beginning. So you've got a side where if India put up a good score and South Africa are chasing, I'd give them very little chance of being able to do it. But conversely, I mean, if South Africa bat first, I think they can be held to something moderate and India could chase it relatively comfortably. I think that's a more likely scenario. So it seems like South Africa's only chance that I can see is to get their quicks into it early. And if their fast bowlers rip them up and end up with sort of 4 for 20, 5 for 30, something like that, then they're in the game. You know, so India will still probably make their way to 120 one way or another. But that seems to me to be the only really viable chance that South Africa have got because their batters haven't had an opportunity to bat freely and to bat big really through this whole tournament. Maybe the USA game aside when de Kock did most of the scoring. So they're not ready to go out there and plunder 200 on a nice pitch. They're going to have to scrap for it and maybe that's the only way is if they can get as much assistance as possible in the first few overs and knock 4 or 5 Indian batters over, which is unlikely, but that might be their only road through.
Yeah, they need to do is 28 days did at Luna Park and rip it up, Geoff. You're probably at that. I agree, by the way. I don't think the toss is actually a thing tomorrow. I think we're rocking up knowing what's going on. I think if India win the toss, they're batting because why wouldn't they? Their formula has been to do that, and they've done it so well in the last 3 games. They had that comprehensive victory over Bangladesh. It's only 6 days ago, but it feels like that was the platform. We know what they did to Australia, marmalised them, 200 plus. Yep. And then, of course, they did more than enough when batting first against England to apply so much scoreboard pressure. So I'd be flabbergasted if India don't take the opportunity to bat first and trust their exceptional bowling attack to do the business under pressure later on. And the other side of it, you're right, South Africa have been unconvincing chasing, but they've kept winning. Like the fact they never actually dropped one. And the best of that lot in a way. They should have dropped about 4. Jesus. Totally. But you know, coulda, shouldas. They didn't. And they held their nerve crucially against the West Indies in what was an elimination game. So everyone talks about the fact that South Africa have won their first elimination game for fucking ever to win the semi-final. Well, and they did win an elimination game in 2015. Not the first time they've won an elimination game, but it was kind of like an elimination final when they played the West Indies on the final day of their group stage or the final day of their Super 8 stage. So they have held their nerve in a really tough, hard-fought chase to win, and they still have 3 match-winning finishes. They've still got David Miller, still got Hendrik Klaasen, still got Tristan Stubbs, the latter of which hasn't really fired in the tournament. David Miller, who has hung tough, remembering that if not for him, they lose to the Dutch, and Klaasen, who's an enigma. And we know that at his best, he's a 100 in 49 balls kind of cat. So I reckon those 3 chasing will be why they are more than comfortable batting second. And on top of that, they've got the sort of fast bowlers with Marco and with Kaisa Rabada and with, in the middle overs, Norkia, probably from over 6 onwards with him, that if they get on a roll, there can be, to use the nuclear war jargon, which I've been reading a lot of recently, there can be a decapitation event. They have got the ability to fire in a missile that takes out the capital. Like they can do that. Not many teams have the armory to pull that off. I think South Africa do. Like I genuinely believe that if they bowl first, they have the type of team that could do that. I don't think they will because India's batting's so well balanced that they bat so deeply. And look, they could make a change as well, India. They could bolster their batting lineup by bringing in Sanju Samson at the expense of Shivam Dube, who did go down the list a couple of days ago in the semi-final. They've got flexibility there too, and we know they've got such a balanced side with Akshar Patel. So I'm not saying they will do it, but they could. And that's the sort of thing, if you're going to bed tonight and you're Rohit Sharma, you'll have that in the back of your mind. You'd be negligent not to think about what's our plan B if we're 30 for 4. How do we play it tactically if we do get in an early strife? So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, or rather, I'd be staggered if we have any other scenario, rather, coin comes down, South Africa popping him in, or India doing the bold thing and batting as they like to do.
Yeah, I suppose that there's a strong argument for that. Whether South Africa would try to throw them off by batting first, I don't know. But I feel like whatever South Africa would make batting first, India would probably run it down. The selection thing's interesting. Would you make a change for a final? Would they drop Dubé in order to bring someone in? The old winning team thing. I mean, he hasn't really contributed much, but he's slotted a couple of massive sixes. So, and he's still the kind of player who can make you 30 off 10 at some point and be the difference in a game. You know, they've got that. Does
it come down to? Are we playing a bit of chess here, though, Geoff? Because Dubé's the spin specialist, right? Dubé's the guy they know who can.
Sure.
If they think South Africa are playing the second spinner, you know what I mean? If they just think Shamsi's playing, if they've done the sort of sums in their own mind or whatever intel they can gather, if they think that they're not going with the Bartman and they're going with the left arm wristy instead, which makes sense to me, by the way, your point before about go with the more attacking weapon when you're the underdog, that stands up to me. Then maybe Dubé keeps his spot on that basis. But if they feel like they're going to go with the seamer, then maybe the aggressive, maybe the assertive thing to do would be to make the change, to go to Sanju Samson and live a little. Look, it'd be a massive call, of course.
Does Kohli find the ability to switch on? You know, just like he tried. I kind of appreciated in the semi-final that he tried to play ugly in an aggressive way. We often talk about players playing ugly defensively, you know, betting in through a test session and grinding it out. This was Kohli going, okay, well, things aren't working out for me here, so I'm just going to try to plant every second ball into the stands. He was coming down the wicket every other delivery. He did middle one, absolutely slotted one over mid-wicket, and then get bowled leg stump trying to do the same thing. But it seemed like at least there was clarity of thought that this is what I've got to do. Like, I can't afford to get bogged down and make 30 off 30 here. I've got to either contribute or get out. And he did that. Is there... I don't know. It's like after such a difficult tournament, it'd be hard to click.
I don't know. You're right. It is a difficult thing to square here, isn't it? I would think that the Kohli piece of this is made a little bit easier on the back of the fact that we know he's had big game performances before. You go back to the 2014 final, if you wish, the last time that India made a serious final, a big time final. It was the T20 decider. The last time in T20 cricket, I mean, of course, they made the World Cup final last year. And that was where Kohli top scored with 77, albeit a score that wasn't enough because Sri Lanka chased it down with Joe Wardner and Sangakkara batting at the end, wasn't it, in that World Cup final in Dhaka. Yep. But he's helped dramatically by the fact that Rohit Sharma's gone 92-57, right? Like that, any pressure that might be on the Kohli-Rohit opening partnership from earlier in the tournament, that's completely gone. And Kohli did bat very well against Bangladesh a week ago. So he missed out against Australia, getting a duck, and as you say, had to grind it out a wee bit against England, but that ended up being right for the surface. So, yeah, I think that no real dramas with Kohli, but especially when you look at it in totality with him next to Rohit Sharma going as well as he does. And that's going to be of interest to me as well. Rohit batted in a one gear down against England compared to the way he batted against Australia. If the pitch is true, if the pitch does look like it's going to be, you know, if par is, let's pick a number, 184 or something like that, does Rohit go, fuck par, I want 220, and I'm going to trust my teammates the way that he trusted them against Australia? I'll redouble my point from the other day. I thought that was brave and selfless batting against Australia because he was like, I'm going to risk getting out first ball to try and bury Australia. Well, if they're batting first and they reckon they're going to need 180 plus, will he take the same approach? You know, I might get out for 12 off 4 in an effort to try and get 200 plus, knowing that there's so much batting to come that it's worth the risk. I like to believe he'll take that approach.
I think they have to. I think that fact that it's worked so effectively in their last two games for him means that there's no other option but to do that. It'll be McCullum 2015 style. You've got to keep doing it the way that you did it, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You know, it wasn't like that in the 50 over World Cup final. People get stuck into Rohit for getting out there, but he was trying to do the same thing. He was trying to be aggressive off the top, and he did give them enough of a platform with that brief, fast innings that India should have done better in that game, and the fact that they didn't isn't on the first guy to get out. But look, they're blasting the R&B here in where I'm recording, so maybe it's time to wrap this up, and all this will be redundant in a little while.
Maybe, maybe not. Before we do, we'll quickly take a break and go to the Final Word Hall of Fame. Final Word Hall of Fame is brought to you by Westfield London, Westfield Stratford City. And I just want to, last reminder, we've got our watch along in London tomorrow. So I'm going to park the copy for today, and I'm just going to issue this carte blanche reminder.
Call to arms.
3 p.m. That's when we've got the tables from.
Okay.
At Sixers, Westfield London, there's going to be plenty of space. So just rock up. Don't need to tell me. Rock up, bring your friends. It's going to be a lovely afternoon, lots of familiar faces. And if you're brand spanking new, what better time to rock up than to watch a World Cup final? They got 2 of the big screens for us, all that kind of stuff that you want.
Yep.
And I can tell you there'll be money, put behind the bar, as it were. So you can get yourself a little glass of wine or a beer or something like that when you're watching the cricket. And in all probability, you won't have to pay for it. So come along, Westfield London tomorrow, which is at Shepherd's Bush, 2 Sixers, and find me or find someone who you think looks like a cricket fan. You can watch the final between India and South Africa.
And get in the net.
Final word,
you can get in the net. You can play World Cup mode against whoever else is there. You can smash some straight sixes, and you can try to dominate the power play.
That's happening. We've got nets. I'm not quite sure when the nets are, but it's during the first innings, so we can tailor our afternoon around that. Just in terms of Hall of Famey sort of stuff, the fact that South Africa, I was reading Neil Manthorpe's excellent column this afternoon. So they arrived at the terminal and spent 7 hours at Trinidad Airport en route. They were meant to have a charter flight that was departing at 10:40 a.m.
Yep.
They arrived after their half an hour journey at 6 o'clock p.m.
Yep.
Deidre Chambers. That would happen to the men. Who would have thought? But no, and David Miller was very classy in the way he handled the questions around this. He acknowledged that the logistics have been a shambles. And Geoff, you'll have a longer chance to have a run up on that, having been party to some of this when the tournament is over. But for a side that, has gone through so much over the journey, all the way back to Sydney in 1992, Karachi, Birmingham, St. Lucia, Nottingham, Dhaka, Auckland, Calcutta. It all ended in Trinidad. I don't think spending 6 hours longer there would have been a huge thing, knowing they were en route to Barbados for a final.
Well, that is one way to look at it, I suppose. They didn't have very much recovery time between their semi and the next game, so those hours would have felt very long, I imagine. But yeah, it was all because, the initial statement was that a light aircraft had issues with landing, quote unquote, at Barbados Airport at Grantley Adams. We later saw a photograph of the light plane. Everyone was fine. No one was hurt. But the entire undercarriage, like the landing gear, was just non-existent. It was like belly down on the runway. So clearly, like the landing gear had ripped off on landing or something like that. So issues with landing were somewhat euphemistic. But yes, it takes them a while because then they have to go and do investigative stuff with the plane where it is. They can't move it until they've figured out what went wrong, which meant that nothing could land for the rest of the day. So who could have foreseen that trying to travel between 2 small islands with 1 day's notice between a semi-final and a final might be a problem? Also, we have a tropical storm forecast for Monday, which is supposed to start peaking sort of Sunday night into Monday morning, which might just mean that everybody trying to leave after the reserve day can't do that either. So looking forward to an extra 3 weeks in Barbados at the current rate, because hurricane season is gearing up. Good times.
That could be a very, very big after party if it is the case that none of you can leave the next day. You're all going to be stuck for a couple of days. That happened to me once many years ago in Peru, and anyway, a good time was had by all. Okay, let's hope that someone sticks the landing tomorrow, that it's an excellent final. We'll be at Westfield London at Sixers there. They're more extra, less ordinary. Geoff, enjoy the final. We'll be back for our recap in the usual way. The other episodes will be in the feed as always. Our weekly shows dropped about, I don't know when it drops. At some point, there will be our weekly history show as well coming out after the final. And you can join us for all the fun at patreon.com/the final word. Join our Discord. Join the nicest part of the internet, at least the cricketing internet. That's our brag. And it's true. I'm Adam Collins. He's Geoff Lemon. We'll catch you tomorrow after the final. Bye.
Bye then.